seated. Over the years, I've seen various kinds of conflict in religious communities and in parish churches. But I've never quite witnessed anything like I saw in a previous parish after we hired a consultant to help us think through the issues of being a welcoming parish. This consultant had lots of interesting ideas, very helpful ideas. Some were easy to implement and easy to conceptualize. Others were hard to internalize and difficult to implement. Our consultant helped us think through all the interrelated issues about threshold resistance. That's the kind of resistance that people feel entering a new space for any kind of institution. But for the church, it's very important to think about this threshold resistance, because signage in this area is so important, because a visitor needs to feel comfortable as he or she is trying to find his or her way around an unfamiliar space. We discussed the difficulties that our form of worship poses to a newcomer. We have this prayer book. We have a kind of call and response kind of worship. And if you don't know the rhythms, it's a little daunting. Considered the architecture of a worship space. He informed us that when a building is 3/4 full, it is full in the eyes of the newcomer. The newcomer feels that he or she doesn't have space. There's not a place. And the newcomer feels like they're not needed in that kind of context. Seating is also very significant. Think about how oftentimes people choose the aisle first. Now, I'm quite familiar with this. I don't like to be boxed in anywhere either, especially in a closed-in space. I like to be on the aisle, especially on an airplane. But what happens when the newcomer tries to take a seat and all the aisle seats are full? The newcomer has a couple of options. And it's largely dictated, these options are largely dictated by the person sitting in the aisle. Sometimes the person seated on the aisle forces the newcomer to crawl over them. Well, that's kind of tough on a visitor, you know? Sometimes the person on the aisle stands and becomes a human doorway to let the person go down the row, and then the doorway closes again and the person takes the seat. But boy, the most welcoming thing, according to our consultant, might be if the person seated on the aisle moved down the number of spots necessary. Not bad, huh? Not bad. Now, the parish I was serving, we thought the most welcoming thing to go a step further might be if members of the parish didn't sit on the aisle at all. Okay? We would come into the church, and then we would take the seat closest to the wall and fill the sides first, sort of leaving that open space for newcomers and visitors to take root. Now, this sounds so easy, doesn't it? There's no rocket science about this. It's obvious. But what is so obvious to us was so difficult to implement then. I've never seen the kind of whining and crying and moaning and upheaval about this. Because half the church wanted to be welcoming and affirming and create space, and the other half saw their seat as a sacred preserve. that not even God could get in between. So we had this kind of hopscotch game all around the church. People started arriving 20 minutes early so they could grab a hold of their seat, stake out their claim, pitch their tent. You know what I mean? Until finally, before a service, at the start of the service, our rector stood in the center aisle and reminded us what the whole exercise was about. It was about creating room, creating space, that others might share in the life that we had there in that place. That others might take their place and hear the story and become participants in our common life.